And joining us right now on the Rothman Orthopedic Guest Line, he's back, and he looks fairly similar to the last time we talked to him, which was about a month ago. Paul Hudrick from Liberty Ballers. What's up, Paulie?
You know, Mark, just living the dream over here, man. How are you?
Do you have the man bun today? My audience wants to know.
It's there. Yeah, it's there.
Let's get this out of the way. That was the first order of business, and this is the only time I'll put that young man second. Congratulations, Dad!
Thank you.
The proud father of a handsome as hell young man, Miles. Congratulations there, Mr. Hudrick.
Thank you. We are absolutely over the freaking moon. So excited to have him. And yeah, it's been the longest and shortest 2 weeks of my entire life, it feels like. Actually, it'll be 3 weeks coming up very soon here. So
wow.
Yeah, time is like flying and standing still at the same time. But it's been incredible. It's so awesome. And yeah, we're ridiculously tired and ridiculously happy.
I'm just happy you literally made me another basketball guest, and I'll talk to him in a couple of months. You know, we'll talk about maybe the trade deadline with him, and we'll get his takes on it.
That's all he wants for Christmas is the jersey of the player they get for Ben Simmons. That's all he wants.
Look how what a tease. All right, hey, we'll get to that. We'll get to that whole Ben Simmons drama in a second there. But I have to ask you this question because I want to start it off with this because I still can't believe what the hell I was watching the other night against the Grizzlies. I started the show yesterday with bring it in, folks. Bring it in for a hug. If you watched that fourth quarter and you had no money on the game whatsoever and you watched it simply because you love your 76ers and you'll watch no matter what, bring it in because that was gross. Literally, Doc Rivers ended his press conference, which was all of like 90 seconds with, I guess you guys probably don't have a lot of questions. Let's go watch football or something. And I'm like, he's pretty much got it there. What the hell happened against the Grizzlies?
Well, first of all, to be honest, I took Doc's advice. I was like, oh, man, there is a football game on. I should probably just flick the channel here. And I did. It was a heck of an end to that game, so I'm glad I did. Thanks, Doc. But, yeah, I mean, look, when your two best offensive players get scratched, one a half hour before the game, the other literally right before tip, that leads to disaster 95% of the time. Like, that's not something that, like, if you had a day's notice that you were going to be missing both guys, maybe that makes a slight difference. And on top of that, I know they don't have John Morant right now, but the Grizzlies have been one of the hottest teams in the NBA. I think they're now 8 of 9 they've won since Shai's been out. Mm-hmm. They are playing excellent. So, it was just a combination of so many things that just led to a disastrous game. No Joel Embiid, no Seth Curry. That kills you offensively, really kills you defensively too without Joel Embiid in the middle. And you saw that it felt like the Grizzlies had a free throw line at times, and they didn't do a very good job defending the 3-point line either. They turned the ball over a ton. I mean, the only two bright spots were Tyrese Maxey and Charles Bassey. That's it. It seemed like everyone else, they look slow, they look sluggish, it just looked like they didn't want to be there. And I guess they didn't want to be there. And it's just, it is what Doc said too. To start off the presser, it's a burn the tape game. And we put in our Liberty Baller Slack channel. I said, all right, recaps up. Now let us never speak of this game ever again. So that's where we're at Liberty Ballers.
That's great management out of you. That's great management. The last thing I want to say about that game, because we will burn the tape. Look, I hate piling on a guy. We know that Tobias Harris is a max contract player because that's a statement of fact. Whether or not he's worthy of being a max contract player, I think, is also a statement of fact to say, no, he is not. Is he ever going to develop? I say develop. He's not a kid, obviously, but is he ever going to be a type of guy you could rely on to be consistent offensively when you have guys out of the lineup that are normally your big scorers?
Well, he is what he is. I mean, honestly, he really is. But at the same time, last year during the regular season, he was pretty damn good.
Oh, yeah, he was. Yeah.
I would argue he should have been an all-star last year. So to see, and look, and this is not, to make it very abundantly clear, he is a near max player, technically not a max. I know it's semantics, but near max player. It is not playing. He's not playing anywhere near a max player, flat out. And he needs to be. When you're making that money, when you're relied upon that heavily, you need to be that guy. These aren't excuses. These are just things that I like, reasons perhaps to why he is not playing as well as he should be. One, in and out of the lineup. He's a rhythm player. He's a rhythm kind of guy. So to be in and out of the lineup, to have different other guys in and out of the lineup, I think that's messed with him a little bit, and I don't think he's ever felt comfortable this season at all. So that's one thing I think is still. And then two, I think he's like health-wise, I think he's been like legitimately really sick. I think COVID hit him hard. And then from what I understand, the illness that he suffered after COVID was maybe even worse. So he's not operating probably at 100% right now. And then I'd say the other thing, Mark, and I know some people don't want to hear this, but he is a guy that has traditionally played well with Ben Simmons in the lineup. Part of that is transition. Tobias Harris is a very good transition player. You see Tobias not shoot well from three. One of Tobias Harris's favorite shots is Ben Simmons going full speed ahead, 100 miles an hour down the floor in transition, and then Tobias Harris hitting little trail three-pointers. That's one of his favorite shots. It's not there right now. So I think, with all of that said, it's Tobias Harris's success shouldn't be contingent upon Ben Simmons being in the lineup or Joel Embiid being in the lineup. Tobias Harris, to your point, on a night like Monday against the Grizzlies, he's got to be the best player on the court because he's getting paid to be the best player on the court on either team. So he has to be that. He has to step up. I think there are reasons to believe that, the struggles aren't going to be all season long and that he can be the guy that he at least was last season, but he's got to do it.
Speaking of Ben Simmons, as you mentioned him a couple times already, give me the goods, Hudrick. I know you basketball insiders are holding out on all of us. What's going to happen here? And first, let's just get this out of the way. Why is Wednesday, December 15th, such a big deal in the eyes of the trades going on in the NBA?
Right. So the long and short of it is on December 15th, players that were signed this past offseason are now eligible to be traded. The reason why that's significant is I don't know the exact numbers. I think Bobby Marks from ESPN might have had it. Like 60% of the league was available to be traded before December 15th. After December 15th, it's like 80% of the league.
Okay.
So basically, you're just throwing way more players in the pool. Now, those players maybe aren't necessarily guys that are going to be available for Ben Simmons or that you'd want in a Ben Simmons trade. But when you're talking NBA and you're talking matching salaries and you're talking all these moving parts in this Rubik's Cube from hell that is the NBA CBA, it just makes the pool larger and it makes it easier to get a little bit more creative. I know Woj had mentioned, the possibility of 3 and 4 team trades. I think that's given Daryl Morey's history, the guy who orchestrated the most complicated trade in NBA history, simply to get Robert Covington to play center for him when he was in Houston. Like, I would not be surprised if this winds up being. It's not going to be 1-for-1. Like, it's not going to. It's just not. I can't imagine a scenario where that happens. This is going to be a complicated trade. There's going to be multiple moving parts. Who they get in return, I have no clue. But I think it's going to be a very complicated trade. And it being December 15th, it gives Daryl Morey more flexibility, gives him more options, and just more teams and more players he can work with.
Do you have a scenario in your head that is like what you're mentally preparing for? Like, let's say that Dame Lillard is 1,000% off the table. What's the plausible and very possible trade that you would be happy with in a return for Ben Simmons?
So it really runs the gamut because
we know that there's a million options out there, but like what do you have your heart set on right now? From a professional standpoint, like 2 or 3 trades that are out there right now that you think would be the best case scenario and realistic case scenario, I guess.
If there is any possibility that the Oklahoma City Thunder would listen on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, that would be a guy that would be very high on my list. Now, there's no indication that they are. Zach Lowe, I think, had mentioned from ESPN, over the summer that maybe they perhaps don't view him as a franchise guy or whatever. They did sign into an extension, so that might goes against that a little bit, but at the same time, that doesn't mean they won't trade him. Now, some people might say, well, why the hell would Oklahoma City do that? If I'm going to get in Sam Presti's head, the man who has accumulated more draft picks than Sam Hickey could even dream of, you have a player in Ben Simmons who is still 25 years old, still under contract, and has star potential. Get him into Oklahoma City, where no one cares and no one's watching, have him show out for the next year, And in a year from now, you could probably turn around and unload him for multiple picks. So it kind of goes to it, and they have a very talented young point guard in Josh Giddey, who's also an Australian, by the way. And you have to ask yourself too, if you're Sam Presti, do Gilgeous-Alexander and Giddey, is that a combination that's going to work in the long term? And if the answer is no, perhaps the scenario works out better, where you get Ben Simmons in there, and either you keep him because he looks really good next to Giddey, or you look to move him in a year because he will have, you see what he's done. Like, he got what Sam Presti did with Chris Paul, what Sam Presti did with Al Horford. Like, he's getting these players, they're showing out while they're there, and then he's turning around and getting these, extremely good assets for them. Mm-hmm. So I could see that as a possibility. Another guy, there's the word is that the Pelicans are still trying to make the playoffs for some stupid reason. While Zion looks like he's not going to play a game this year,
right?
But like a guy like Brandon Ingram, I think is somewhat realistic.
Okay,
I really like Brandon Ingram as a scorer, as a guy who can just get you a bucket. I really like. A little bit of a weird fit perhaps with Tobias Harris and even maybe Joel Embiid, because all three of those guys love them some mid-range jumpers. So maybe that's not the most perfect fit, but I'd be willing to take a look and see what that appears to be.
Well, now, on that note, real quick, what about not just him fitting here, Ingram fitting here in Philadelphia, but Simmons fitting there in New Orleans with Zion?
Right. There is a world where it makes sense and a world where it doesn't. Because I could see those two actually being like a really good kind of pick and roll partnership. I could kind of see that being because Zion is actually willing to shoot, and he's not a terrible shooter when he's when he's healthy, and he's a really good scorer. So perhaps that balance, they could make that work. And if Zion elevates his game defensively, those two could be a really dangerous pair defensively. So, I would say that Ben Simmons just raises the floor more than Brandon Ingram does for them. For what they need a boost defensively big time, and I think Ben Simmons could provide that. So that's where maybe that would make sense to them.
Okay.
And maybe accelerate their timeline a little bit. Who knows? And then the other thing, if we're talking about like right now, what I think is realistic right now, I've said this kind of, I think all summer when we talk, Mark, if I have to take something, a Spurs package with, DeJounte Murray as a centerpiece.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at what's funny too, if you look at DeJounte Murray's numbers right now, they are basically Ben Simmons numbers with some threes sprinkled in and better free throw shooting. And he plays great defense. So I would certainly entertain a package that's, Murray, perhaps Keldon Johnson. If it's that, I would be very interested in that. And I would do that right now if the Spurs were interested. I don't know that they are because Murray is still ascending offensively. So I don't know that they would view Simmons as, but I think what teams are going to try to, or what GMs are going to try to talk themselves into is that Ben Simmons was a number 1 overall pick. He was, looked at as a possible generational talent. And if you're the Spurs, you think to yourself, I get him in here with Greg Popovich, and maybe Greg Popovich can get that out of him, can get that star potential, that guy out of him. And maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but that might be a good swing for that organization, because how good are they going to be with DeJounte Murray as their best player? Probably not any, probably no better than what they are. If you bring in Ben Simmons and Popovich can get more out of him, perhaps that elevates you. Maybe it doesn't, but maybe it does. But all that to say too, like those are the ones that are kind of reasonable right now. I also don't think it's crazy to say maybe you wait a little bit. Maybe you wait to see what happens with Bradley Beal and the Wizards. He had some interesting quotes the other day talking about how he wants to be a little selfish perhaps and is not signing his extension yet. Those are some interesting comments, and that team is starting to really come back down to earth. You look at the Boston Celtics; they are kind of a mess. I mean, they beat the Bucks the other night, but that's a pretty messy situation. Mm-hmm. Perhaps Jaylen Brown becomes available at some point. So I don't think it's necessarily the worst strategy to wait until closer to the deadline to see if some of these bigger fish come loose. But again, if a good deal comes along now, certainly you'll explore it and possibly take it.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things to come out of all this right now is that Daryl Morey is basically having the whole idea, the whole plan, playing into his plan, which is, look, all of a sudden these teams are calling me about Ben Simmons. How about this, huh? So I love that. Last one I just want to throw to you. You mentioned Bradley Beal, which is one that I'd be in favor of. A little bit of a volume shooter, though. 19 shots a game is pretty much what he's averaging right now for around 21 points a game. But Sacramento Kings, we've talked about Buddy Hield before. We've talked about Halliburton before. We've talked about De'Aaron Fox before. First of all, overall, that trade package or, a combo of that. And also De'Aaron Fox right now versus Tyrese Maxey. Similar players, similar styles. Maxey grows into that eventually. Where do you have that at?
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you from people I've talked to, I don't think the Sixers really have any interest in De'Aaron Fox. I don't think it's a guy that they view as a player that they would move for Ben Simmons. And I think part of it is just they don't see that like they value Simmons more than Fox.
Okay.
The other part of it is I think you're hitting that nail on the head where Maxey is sort of in that mold, but I think Maxey's going to be better, quite frankly. I think Maxey already is showing growth as a shooter, and I think Maxey is already a better defender than De'Aaron Fox is. Like, I flat out. De'Aaron Fox, no question, is an explosive player, is an exciting player. Last year came really close to making an all-star team. He's looked bad this year. I mean, he's looked really bad. And again, is not a good defender. And yeah, if I had my choice right now between those two guys, I'm picking Tyrese Maxey.
I love it.
So that's why to me, I don't think that makes sense. Like I know from people I've talked to, I know that they're not really interested in De'Aaron Fox, and I think they're right to not be interested in De'Aaron Fox. I don't think that's a guy that I would entertain. Now, again, if it gets to the point where we get closer to the trade deadline, and none of these big fish, none of that's coming to fruition, and none of these big deals that you want, but the Sixers are really competitive, and they might have a shot, to take one of the higher seeds and maybe make a run. And you feel like, all right, we have to do something. We have to make some type of move to improve this team and not just have Ben Simmons rotting, sitting on the sideline. If you look at Sacramento and, Harrison Barnes, Buddy Hield, I don't love that, but I think that makes them. I think that would make the Sixers a better team. I do.
It's certainly more deep, yeah.
Yeah, and I think Buddy Hield is actually an improved player. I think he's looked pretty good this year, and you throw him in the mix here with Joel Embiid, that really intrigued. The guy takes 10 threes a game. The Sixers need a guy who wants to take 10 threes a game.
Yeah, really.
That's a great thing that they could use. And then a guy like Harrison Barnes is having a great season. And he's a more willing 3-point shooter than, say, a Tobias Harris. So to have those two guys, I think, could make you a better basketball team. Now, that to me, that's like again, if we have nothing else, if there's nothing else out on the table, and we just need something to try to improve this team right now, that package with picks is something I might consider.
What do you make of the RJ Barrett idea from the Knicks?
Not into it.
Okay. That's all I need to know. That's all I need to know. Good. I'm not crazy. All right.
I like RJ Barrett. I think he's going to be a pretty good player, but if the goal is to win a championship, if you're trying to become a better team right now, I don't think that helps you all that much, especially, you want to space the floor, and RJ Barrett's not a floor spacer. He's not a great shooter. So that's, there are things about him I like. If you're getting a bunch of picks with him, maybe, or you're getting another player that can help you right now, maybe. But to me, that's not something that I would entertain right now.
Last one for you has to do with the modern day Sixers, not potential future Sixers. Are we done with the whole Danny Green and the starting lineup thing? That's now Matisse Thybulle's job until further notice, right?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Here's what so when I look at that situation, I look at it a couple different ways. One, I think starting Matisse Thybulle and putting him on the best perimeter player to start the game is a good move. Because you're getting off to a better start defensively. It helps you kind of get into the flow of a game a little bit better. So from that standpoint, I like that. The other thing is, I would say, I still like Danny Green an awful lot. I think he's still a really effective player. I think he's really important to this team. I think his leadership is huge, and I still think he can play.
I agree. I agree with all that.
Bringing him off the bench and lessening his role, too, on his 34-year-old legs, which have had multiple injuries the last couple of years. Perhaps it is a way to preserve him so that you're getting more effective minutes. Maybe you're playing him less, but those minutes are more effective. If Doc were to decide to do that, I'd be on board. I think it could help the team. I think it could help Matisse grow and mature more into that role as like that defensive stopper. And I think it could help Danny kind of prolong his career and kind of preserve him for bigger minutes and bigger moments.
I agree. I agree. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Now, here's the thing, and I was getting an argument with somebody about this on social media the other day. The thing that, like, clearly Danny Green has over Matisse Thybulle is the three-point shot, without question. But Matisse Thybulle also crashes the boards. He gets to the net. He attacks the rim on offense as well. So although the three-point game is not there, I never see Danny Green streak into the rim like I do Matisse Thybulle. So at least that's there as part of his offensive game. True, defensively, he's billion miles ahead of his game offensively. But that's one thing he does that Danny Green does not do.
Sure. I will say this, though. A couple things, actually, they're like sneaky little things that kind of aren't little things when you're talking about the Sixers and you're talking about playing with a guy like Joel Embiid. One, Danny Green really, really understands spacing extremely well and moves without the ball like as good as any player in the league. That's not even an exaggeration. There is literally a cut called the Danny Green cut because it's his thing. Like that where he spaces out and backs up into the corner. Like that's his cut. That's how like good he is off the ball and understanding movement and understanding spacing. The other thing, entry passes. For some reason, this team sucks at entry passes. They have the best offensive big man, the best post player in the league, and they suck at entry passes. But Danny Green is very good at that.
Damn it.
And again, that's a small thing, but when you're talking about a guy like Joel Embiid and how your offense is contingent upon his success, that's not a small thing. So those two things, as much as maybe they're kind of, little nuanced kind of things, they're a pretty big deal, and that's another part of his game that he has over Matisse right now.
Damn you, Paul Hudrick. I didn't even think of that. That's why I have you on there, my friend. That's why I have you on.
I try.
Paul Hudrick, check him out. Liberty Ballers. Follow him on the old social media. Follow him on Twitter, of course. And one of the latest dads to the Philadelphia area, Paul Hudrick, Liberty Ballers. Paulie, thank you so much, brother. Great catching up with you.
Anytime, Mark. You got it, man.
All right. From all of us here at the Farzy Show, congratulate the missus for us, too. All right.
I will do. Thank you.
All right, brother. Paul Hudrick joining us from Liberty Ballers on the Rothman Orthopedics Guest Line.